What's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. Today, I was initially, let me start off by saying this is the second time I'm recording a video because my first video, my mic was giving off a lot of feedback for some reason. It's really the first time it's ever done that. So I just clipped it on, repositioned it, and just double checked the little furry thing on it. And also too, my dog's in here in the room with me and he is sleeping and he is snoring so loud. He's a small tiny dog, but he snores like a 100-pound big dog. It just amazes me how much noise he makes. But in any event, the mic was also picking up my dog snoring, so you could just hear the sound of that in the background on top of it giving a little bit of feedback. So just some funky stuff going on with the sound today. Hopefully it comes out a little bit better for this video. But I initially was going to do a game recap for the NBA playoffs. The Sixers are playing the Knicks in round two. It's game two, round two, and just I, because the games come on so late, and they end so late. I didn't want to wait. I, I I was initially going to go ahead and stick to that, but then as it was getting later and later, I was like, nah, I don't know that I'm going to really feel like doing the video that late. So now I'm just like, okay, let me go ahead and get a video out. But something else that I wanted to talk about that that sparked the idea earlier, an interview that I watched on Scott Evans' show. He was interviewing Tamron Hall, and they were discussing a lot of things, and then Tamron Hall was mentioning, like, she was talking about her career and how it, like, her experience for the first time that she ever got fired, which was well into her journalism, TV career. That was like, she was mentioning how that was really like the first time she ever got fired from her job. And she was talking about how she handled that situation. But then one thing she mentioned that really kind of stood out, and how she was talking about it, was basically she was mentioning how she talks about in her book about, who are you? I had to kind of write it down. Who are you if there's no title beneath your name, right? She was basically talking about, not letting what you do define who you are, not being, attached to your job title, not, attaching your identity to your job title. And I was like, oh, yeah. She was just making a lot of really good points, and she was saying some stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, I resonated with some of that stuff. Just how she was talking about a lot of things that I've also experienced, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced, particularly, like, how when you first meeting people, um, you know, in any type of setting, when you're first meeting people, one of the first things, if not the very first thing they ask you is, what do you do for a living? And um, and I think because we're so conditioned to um, lead with what we do, because in society, that's the measure of success. Do you have a good job? You know what I mean? Do you make a good salary? Good salary. Do you have a nice car? Do you have a nice house? Like, all of those material things, right, define you as a successful person. And heavily with the, what do you do, job title, identity, and a lot of people, work, they don't really have an identity outside of their job. So when when somebody asks, what do you do for a living? that's it. That's your moment to shine, right? And I was just thinking about that, and she also made a good point too, which I kind of came to this realization a while ago too, was about how, like, rarely do people ask us, like, rarely do they lead with, what are your hobbies or your interests? What are the things that you value? What are the things that are important to you? Like, and I mean, I'm literally talking about in any setting, not just like, if you're on a date or anything like that, but just in settings where you're just meeting, new people. Um, Nobody ever really leads with the who are you type questions as opposed to the what do you do type questions. And I know for me personally, I never really, I don't think I can honestly say that I attached my identity to the work that I do. I think more so understanding, at a young age, you got to have a good job, the good job titles, because that is, you know, what successful is. Understanding that, yeah, like being conditioned for that part of it, but not to the point where I'm like, oh my God, if I don't make this particular job title, or, you know, um, what am I gonna do? Like, if I don't have this job, what am I gonna do, with myself? I've never been that type of person at all. But just understanding that, I guess, certain job titles meant certain responsibilities, and certain responsibilities meant certain, paycheck, salaries, So just understanding you want to go for those things, especially if you're, trying to move up the corporate ladder, but still being able to kind of keep that separate from allowing it to define, um, completely define who I am. And, but I was just thinking about that, and I was just like, you know, who who am I outside of the work that I do? And that's one of the things, this is one of the great reckonings that, I think once it's I think maybe it starts happening maybe in like your mid 30s, especially once you cross, the 40-year-old threshold, you really kind of start honing in on that. If you haven't figured it out by that time, I think that 35 to 45-ish kind of range is when you're like really kind of focusing in on, what do I value? Like, what are the things that are important to me? What type of work do I want to do? I only say this because that's basically what my experience has been, and why I am at this point in my life where I am taking a step away from all of the traditional, definitions of success, and actually building a lifestyle around what I value the most, as opposed to the thing that makes sense based off of what I've already done, right? Because this path is laid out in front. Okay, you've done this, you've got this degree, you've gotten, you've had these jobs and this experience. This is the path you need to be taking, right? And even though, I'm kind of resetting right now, and I'm preparing to transition the type of work that I do, um, primarily remote work, but repositioning myself, which I have so many things, you guys, that I'm going to dive in, do deep dives um, in later videos. But the career stuff is definitely coming, because it's a big part of the reason why I'm in the process of, resetting and redoing and rebuilding, um, my ideal, lifestyle, right? But just thinking about titles and stuff like that, and and I think I've also too with when it comes to like titles, like job titles, and I mean right now I'm like specifically talking about career based, work based titles, but it also applies to any aspect of life where whatever the role is that you are playing, in your life, you know what I mean? Whatever, title, formal, informal, anything that you're doing that's, a certain type of role that you completely tie your identity to. I think it's important for us to ask if, for instance, if we lost our job tomorrow, like, who are we outside of that job? Is it enough to sustain us, to keep us grounded, motivated, to not completely fall apart? You know what I mean? Or spiral because we no longer have that job, or replace said job with any other role you could have, within your life. And I just think it's like that was just something that really stood out to me today with that interview, was just thinking about spending more time, thinking about the things that we value, and the things that make us happy, you know what I mean? And redefining, our, baseline for joy and fulfillment outside of the workplace, or outside of, other roles that we may fill within our lives. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Um, but yeah, I'd like to know, if anyone out there is, have you ever considered, you know, defining what what's important to you outside of, the work that you do? And another thing about that, just kind of going back to why we always lead with that question, it's kind of it's kind of annoying, like when you think about it, because I think people, I guess it's the whole judgment aspect of it. I mean, we're judgmental. I think that's, human nature. Um, but placing so much weight on, I guess, whether a person is worth it, like measuring their self worth based off of like what they do. Like it's like a person's job, like knowing that it's going to tell you everything you need to know about a person. Like that's kind of like how I think it's treated. And that's just my opinion. I just think the, what do you do? Where do you live? Where do you work? Um, type of questions. It's just all just superficial stuff. And hopefully you, are able to kind of get past, just that aspect of getting to know someone, to really kind of find out, learn more about them as a person outside of what they do. I just wish that, you know, people would take the time, more people, not because I'm speaking generally, but I just wish that more people would take the time to lead with the who are you type of questions. Um, who are you as a person? The things that you value and things like that, more so, with what do you do? So in any event, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that briefly with you all. Just, and just let me know if any of that resonated with you. Do you find that Do you have an identity outside of, what you do for a living? Have you ever like thought about it, put, deep thought into the things that you value, or even ever asked yourself, if I didn't have this job title or this job, tomorrow, would I spiral? Would I be able to stay grounded, stay motivated, and continue, you know, on to the next best thing, without it, you know, defining, without feeling like what I do is what I am. Let me know in the comments. But that's all I have for you all today. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.